Atlanta is 6 months away from deciding who will become its next mayor after Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms made the bombshell announcement that she will not seek re-election. Now it's anyone's race. Her exit stirs what may become an onslaught of new candidates for the Atlanta mayor's race this fall. 11 Alive's Doug Richards has more.
While she quietly questioned her own desire to serve another term as mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms was raising campaign money to run full bore for a second term this fall. But so was Felicia Moore, the city council president who had been challenging Bottoms.
I am extremely excited about the fundraising numbers I have. It shows that I'm a front runner in this race.
Moore has run a citywide race and won. The question is who might challenge her. Attorney Sharon Gay has filed to run. Previous candidates, Mary Norwood, Kwanzaa Hall, and Vincent Ford could also run.
Folk woke up this morning and looked in the mirror and said, that looks like that person would be a good mayor. I'm saying all that to say that there are a lot of people, I'm sure, that are jockeying.
One possible candidate is Kasim Reed, who has surfaced in recent days to talk about crime in Atlanta. A federal investigation has been ongoing into corruption in his administration, though the former mayor appears untouched. But one former Reed confidant thinks Atlanta will look elsewhere.
And I think that the city of Atlanta needs someone new, fresh, and energetic, with new ideas and a new vision.
A poll released by ALG Research earlier last week showed many Atlanta voters are not familiar with the current mayoral candidates. Despite spending more than 20 years in public office, 45% of voters could not identify Atlanta City Council President Felicia Moore. Those who could gave her a 47% approval rating. As for other candidates, Sharon Gay and Antonio Brown, the poll shows 84% and 69% respectively of voters were unable to rate them.